You've done it. Maybe this morning. You crouched down, put on the warmest voice you own, and said something your dog would hate if he understood it. We're going to the vet, buddy. Time for your bath. The same bright, rising tone you'd use for who wants a treat. And for a moment it seems to work. The tail moves. He comes over. So you assume the trick landed, that he heard the music of your voice and nothing else. That the words themselves went past him like wind. For most of the last century, that's what science assumed too. Dogs read tone. Dogs read body language. The actual words were treated as decoration wrapped around the part that mattered. That assumption is now measurably wrong. And the way researchers proved it involved teaching 13 family dogs to lie perfectly still inside a brain scanner. Before the scanners, there was a much simpler experiment. In 2014, Victoria Ratcliffe and David Reby at the University of Sussex set up 2 loudspeakers, one on each side of a dog, and played the same recorded speech through both at exactly the same moment. The phrase was "one dog's know well," a familiar call to come. Then they started taking it apart. In some versions, they stripped the emotional information out, flattened the melody, removed the warmth, leaving mostly the verbal content. In others, they did the opposite. They kept the rising, encouraging intonation, but scrambled the speech until no real words remained. The dogs couldn't move toward one speaker because the sound arrived from both sides at once, but they turned their heads.
When the meaningful words dominated, dogs tended to turn right. When the tone dominated, they tended to turn left. That sounds like a small thing. It isn't. Sound entering one ear is processed more strongly by the opposite side of the brain. A turn to the right points towards left hemisphere processing. A turn to the left points toward the right hemisphere, which is the same broad division humans show. Meaning handled on one side, emotional tone on the other. 2 separate channels, in a species that has never spoken a word. I want to be careful here, because this is where these videos usually overreach. This was a tendency across a group of dogs, not a switch that flips in every dog every time. Some turned the other way, some didn't turn at all.
But the pattern was real, and it raised a question head turns alone couldn't answer. What is actually happening inside? In 2016, a team led by Attila Andix at Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest published the answer in the journal Science. The hard part wasn't the science, it was the training. They taught 13 family dogs, golden retrievers and border collies, ordinary pets, to walk into an fMRI scanner and lie motionless for several minutes at a time. Awake, unrestrained, free to get up and leave whenever they wanted. That last detail matters more than it sounds. Nothing here was forced. The dogs stayed because someone they trusted had patiently taught them that staying was a good idea, and because they believed her. Then that same trainer spoke to them through headphones. She said 4 kinds of things. Praise words in a warm, praising voice, praise words in a completely flat voice, meaningless filler words, the equivalent of however, as if, yet, in that same warm voice, and filler words, flat. 4 combinations, 2 variables, words and tone. And the scanner watched what each one did. Regions on the left side of the dog's brains responded to which words were spoken. Praise words produced a different response than filler words, and that difference held whether the delivery was warm or flat. The tone barely moved it. Meanwhile, a region in the right auditory area responded to tone. Warm delivery produced a different response than flat, and that held regardless of which words were used. The vocabulary barely moved it. 2 systems, running in parallel, doing different jobs. One note on this, because it gets exaggerated constantly. This is a similar division of labor to the human brain, not the same hardware. Dogs don't have our language structures. What they have is a comparable split, meaning on one side, melody on the other. And that is remarkable enough without inflating it. Your dog is not choosing between what you said and how you said it. He is processing both, separately at the same time. But the finding that should change how you talk to your dog came from a 3rd region. The caudate nucleus sits deep in the brain and belongs to the reward system. Gregory Burns and his team at Emory University had already shown it responds in dogs to the things you'd expect. The smell of their owner, the signal that food is coming. In the Budapest study, the caudate stayed relatively quiet for 3 of the 4 conditions. Praise words in a flat voice, not much. Filler words in a warm voice, not much. It responded strongly to one combination only. Praise words, delivered in a praising tone. Both channels agreeing at once. Which is the answer to the thing you did this morning? You can't get there on tone alone. The words are being checked. And you can't get there on words alone either. A distracted, flat, good boy while you're looking at your phone does not reach the place a real one reaches. He isn't fooled by the bright voice attached to the vet trip. He's just being gracious about it. Now let me tell you what this does not mean, because this is where most of the internet loses the plot. This is not evidence that your dog understands language. There's no grammar in there, no syntax, no sentences being parsed. He isn't following your logic. He's registering that certain sound shapes have reliably preceded certain outcomes. The words in that study were words those dogs already knew from years of training. Telling "well done" apart from "however" is a long way from comprehension. And 13 dogs is a small study. It has been built on sense, but it deserves to be described honestly rather than inflated. What it establishes is narrow and solid. The words are not noise. They are being handled by dedicated machinery. So how much vocabulary is actually in there? The famous cases are genuinely remarkable and genuinely misleading. Rico, a border collie studied in 2004, retrieved more than 200 objects by name and appeared to work out new names by elimination, hearing an unfamiliar word and going for the one unfamiliar toy. Chaser, another border collie, learned over 1,000 object names across 3 years of daily structured training with a retired psychology professor. Those numbers get quoted constantly, and they shouldn't be. Not as evidence about ordinary dogs. Chaser was an extraordinary animal in an extraordinary program. Your dog is not Chaser, and neither is mine. Nothing about Chaser tells us what's happening in a mixed breed asleep on your couch. The more interesting recent work involves exactly that dog. In 2024, the Budapest group published EEG research with a simple setup. An owner names an object, then holds up either that object or a completely different one. The dog's brain responses differed between the matching and the mismatching case. The interpretation, and it is still an interpretation with replication ongoing, is that when your dog hears the name of a familiar object, something like an expectation of that object forms, not a trained reflex, something closer to a mental picture. Ordinary pets, not champions. There's a second body of research that fits alongside all this, and it's the part I find hardest to shake. When dogs face a situation they can't read, an unfamiliar object, an ambiguous noise, they look at a human face for guidance and then adjust their behavior based on what they find there. Researchers call it social referencing. Studies have tested this with owners and with strangers, and dogs check in with both. But the owner's reaction moves their behavior more, which points at something specific. Your dog hasn't become fluent in humans, he has become fluent in you. He has spent months or years building an internal model of how you sound when things are fine, and how that changes when they aren't. What your face does when you're genuinely at ease versus performing it. Nobody assigned him this project. He took it on because you are his main source of information about whether the world is safe, which is why the mismatches register. Think of an evening that went badly. Something with nothing to do with him at all, but the tension is in your body, and it's in your voice. You call him over. You use the soft word, the one you always use. Watch where his eyes go. Not to the door, not to the floor, to your face. He's checking the channel the word can't carry. And if there's a pause before he comes, a half second of stillness, that is not stubbornness, and it is not misbehavior. That is a nervous system built to read you, doing precisely the job it was built for. Checking whether the signal and the source are telling the same story. The practical part is smaller than you'd expect, and it matters more. Be consistent with your words. If okay is a release cue on Tuesday and filler on Wednesday, you're putting static on a channel he's genuinely trying to listen to. Let the words and the tone agree. This is the finding with the most direct application. Praise where the voice is warm and the word is real. Reaches somewhere neither one reaches alone. It costs nothing, and it's the difference between praise that lands and praise that decorates. And stop dressing up bad news in a happy voice. It doesn't work. He's checking both channels. What it does do, over time, is teach him that your happy voice sometimes precedes something unpleasant. You're spending down the reliability of your best signal for nothing. Here's what stays with me about all of this. 13 dogs lay still in a loud, strange machine, awake, with the door open behind them because someone they trusted asked them to. And what the machine found was that they had been listening to both halves of that person's voice the entire time. Not for grammar, not for meaning in the way we'd recognize it, for agreement, for whether the words and the warmth were pointing the same direction. Your dog has been running that check every day of his life, quietly, without being asked to. So tonight, when you finally sit down and say something to him without needing anything back, watch what happens next. The long breath out, the way the body goes heavy against the floor. That isn't tiredness. He's had all day to be tired. That's a system that just got a signal it recognizes completely. The word matched. The tone matched. The person behind the voice was telling the truth. The least we can do is give him something that lines up.